There's a new twist on the age gap relationship that frankly is long overdue. Older women are hooking up with young men, and audiences are, surprise, surprise, loving it. Today on the podcast, we dig into the latest rom-com craze and what it says about Hollywood's view on women. I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, this one is especially for my ladies of a certain age. You know, for too long, we've been forced to sit through movies where a much older man is falling in love with a, frankly, inappropriately young woman. And finally, the tables have turned, and it's our turn now. Older women are hooking up with younger men in these movies, and it's great. Turns out people love that. But of course, these are not your average looking ladies, right? They may be over 40, but they are hot, they are fit, nary a crow's foot in sight. Women like Anne Hathaway in The Idea of You, Brooke Shields in Mother of the Bride, and coming next week on Netflix, Nicole Kidman with Zac Efron in A Family Affair. But you know, I've noticed that even though these women are older, they've got full lives, there's no kids in the picture. There's no aging parents. It's not quite as real as maybe some of us might want. Well, we're going to get into that right now. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is back with us. Sadaf Ahsan is here for the very first time. Welcome.
Hi, Amil. Thanks for having us.
Second that.
You can tell I'm very excited to talk about this.
I mean, I love this subject. I think it is the hottest thing that is happening right now personally, which I know is controversial, but I love it.
Oh, I can't even believe it is controversial. But Sadaf, you actually wrote about this recently, and you called it catnip for Gen Zs
Yes.
and millennials.
Oh, totally.
And obviously it's true. It worked on me. But what do you love about this dynamic? Like, why do you think it's so appealing?
Listen, I feel like we have been subjected to a plague of older, ickier men. Woody Allen quite a few times has put himself in this position where they're wooing younger women, and I don't understand how they're nabbing these women. So it's, first of all, just super refreshing to get to see these gorgeous older women have that part in the dynamic where they get to pull the younger boys. It's nice to see a woman at an older age be considered desirable. We know that they are in real life, not on screen very often. And it's a very hot thing to see a pretty boy look up at Anne Hathaway or Nicole Kidman in awe. Like, I look at them. I love it.
Yeah. I don't even want to tell you what my face looked like when I was watching The Idea of You. Kathleen, we've had
You and me both.
We've had 3 of these movies in the past couple of months. Like I just mentioned, Idea of You with Anne Hathaway, Mother of the Bride, and now A Family Affair. What do you think these movies have in common besides, of course, an older lady and a younger man?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to say that The Idea of You is actually a good movie, and
No, it
Mother of the
is.
Bride is not. I have not seen A Family Affair yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be better than Mother of the Bride. I repeat, Mother of the Bride is really bad. I just feel like
really
I have
bad.
to warn everybody about that.
Can I just interject, though, and say Idea of You is not a return to the rom-coms, though, that we love. I will say that. But that might be a little bit.
No, we got to shelve that because I also have thoughts on that, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it a rom-com, but it's a romance. Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing that they have in common is that these leads are beautiful A-list actresses that we've known for a long time. So of course we're going to believe that, Brooke Shields, Anne Hathaway, Nicole Kidman, that they would be desired after they turn 40 and well after that. And I think, speaking of those leads, this new iteration of this trope is very white. It's very aspirational. All of these characters are rich and thin and things that kind of make up for the fact that they are older. When I talked to Robin Lee, who's the author of the book, The Idea of You, she said that the world would look at a 40-year-old Black woman dating a 24-year-old boy band frontman a lot differently. And that it was like a whole can of worms that she didn't want to get into, which I understand. But it is a story that I want to see. And I think that when Hollywood thinks of fluffy, mindless fun, they think of whiteness. And then the last thing they have in common is, the young men in these stories are all very hot, fit gentlemen, Zac Efron, Nick Galitzine, Chad Michael Murray. And let's make no mistake as well, they are grown men.
Yes.
And I think,
of course.
the argument here is that who wouldn't fall for them?
Right.
Who among us? Who among us?
They're also very mature, which I like, since we're talking about things that are not realistic. But again, we can talk about it another time. There is something else I noticed that all these films have in common, which is that even though, from what we know, women at that age are sort of in their sexual peak, the women in these movies are very like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, hook up with you, you hot, desirable young man. Take a listen to this clip of Lana, played by Brooke Shields in Mother of the Bride.
Did you see her? See what? That Hemsworth hottie over there. He's totally checking you out.
Oh, come on. I've got underwear older than he is.
Give me a break. You, Kathleen, you mentioned who among us, but why do you think, as evolved as these movies are trying to be, women still have to sort of play coy and be the coquette when they should be able to, at 40 plus, get what they want?
I feel like there's this idea that that's where I think the taboo squeezes itself in, where it's like, you can't just say yes to this because it's so not acceptable. You have to win it over in some kind of way. And I think that's ridiculous because that is not how it happens in real life. I know plenty of people who've been in age gap relationships, women who've been older. I've been in one. And I think it's completely fine. And it never plays out that way. It actually makes you feel more powerful, dare I say. And can I just add one thing to that list? Because I also am really disappointed that these movies always never end with these couples together. Spoiler alert. And I
mean,
find
the
that
idea of
really
you does. The idea of you does.
But she says, wait, she wants to wait 5 years.
Exactly.
I hated that part.
Yeah, I did not like that. I feel like that was a stipulation for the audience where it plays into the same thing, where it's like, no, we're still saying this is bad because we're not allowing it to fully happen. And I think that is so disappointing. I want to see them go all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that, this is part of maybe the effect of this push for representation and seeing characters on screen who are more diverse in age, race, sexuality. All of a sudden these characters have to be like arbiters of morality. They have to be these upstanding citizens who share, pristine values because they are supposed to reflect an entire demographic. And that's not what I want when I'm talking about seeing more and better representation. I want to see women over 40, Black women, queer women be full human beings who make mistakes sometimes, who do dumb stuff. Like, they should be able to be anti-heroes like a Don Draper. And I think this age gap conversation, it's that each of these characters don't have to protest so much, and everything that Sadaf just said, they can be horny for younger men without the caveat. Like, it's okay, do the dumb thing, hook up with Zac Efron. There doesn't have to be shame in it. Absolutely. But I think it comes from the idea that, like, oh, they have to be like moral, upstanding women as well.
Right.
Yeah. And can I also just say, I would love a little more sex.
Yeah.
These movies are all relatively quote unquote clean. They never really go there. And I think one great example of what we could have, and it kind of speaks to what you're saying, Kathleen, is Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which I don't know if you guys saw, but it was a delicious little movie that came out a couple years ago. Emma Thompson, not your typical object of desire at that age, though I love her and I think she's incredibly sexy, but she gets to play that woman and she has a little more complicated relationship to sex. She woos a man of color. They have a really fascinating little dynamic, and it was so refreshing, but it was a smaller movie. It opened to a smaller audience, but we could have that, and I want to see more of that.
Well, I wonder how much of this sort of shift, and one of the reasons maybe we're starting to see more of these movies, is a reaction to the Me Too movement. The idea that, the power dynamic when it's an older man and a younger woman is starting to become a lot more uncomfortable. So we're exploring this. What do you think about that, Kathleen?
Yeah, I think there's something there. I mean, I do think it's more complicated because, again, in all of these examples we're giving, the men are grown, like Chad Michael Murray is supposed to be in his 30s, I think, in Mother of the Bride. Hayes in The Idea of You is 24. Zac Efron and I were born in the same year.
And we know you're just a little baby, so.
Right? I mean, for the first time telling everyone my age, but there isn't that power dynamic in these stories, right? They aren't students or employees of these women. And I also think the male-female dynamic in age gap cases is different. You know, there isn't the patriarchal history looming over these relationships or the reinforcement of damaging beauty ideals for women that prioritize youth over everything else. You know, that the fantasy here is that a woman's sexual currency does not depreciate over the years or like over the course of her 30s. And I think the most important thing too, as well, even though I do think these stories might be coming because of a shift in our, like the way society thinks of women post Me Too, this isn't real. Like, it's hard to compare these fantasy age gap movies to the Me Too movement because those were real cases of abuse and sexual assault and harassment. You know, we're talking about Anne Hathaway starring in a novel based loosely on Harry Styles, right? Like, it's not that serious. It's not that serious.
I also feel like, I mean, this is a bigger question again for maybe another episode, but how much power do women really have in dynamics like these anyway, especially in a post-Me Too period, especially with these examples where, let's take Idea of You, where Anne Hathaway is wooing a very rich man who's also a celebrity and beloved by a lot of people.
Yeah.
She doesn't really have a ton of power in that dynamic. It's kind of a fairy tale, and that's the thing I think that goes back to what Kathleen said. It is so not real life. It is never quite that clean and sexy and fun. But it can be, and I love watching the fantasy of it for that reason, I will say.
Yeah.
I mean, very quickly, I'm interested in, you know, we talked a bit about how they're hot, they're fit, they don't look their age, which seems to be an important part of this. Like, do you think we are ready for maybe a more realistic older woman in film? Like, even if she's not hooking up with a younger guy, why are we still trapped in this box, Sadaf?
I think that's because that's what Hollywood is. Like, everybody's got to be pretty and beautiful, and we're in 2024 and it's still happening. But I think the fact that we're even seeing the gender swap is a good sign that we're moving a little bit forward. It took decades to get here, but I want to believe. And like the movie that I mentioned before, Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, I feel like there is a sign. It could be there, but you might have to look away from the box office and from what's playing at your local theater to get that taste. But I hope we do get there. I mean, the other thing is these women are moms. They are complicated people. They have shit that's going on in their lives. That's a little bit different. Is that giving us a whole lot? Not really, but we're
moms,
somewhere.
but we never see the kids. It's like they're conveniently at summer camp.
I just want to push back really quickly on the idea that they don't look their age. Because I think that if we are like, oh, they look a decade younger than they are, then that's reinforcing this idea that, you know, this like, we're reinforcing the standards of beauty that society is placing on all of us. Like, Amil, you are over 40. I am 30 redacted. We are
Kathleen, no one ever said I was over 40.
So sorry. I apologize. But I'm sure you get all the time, oh, you don't look 40, you don't look 30, whatever. And what if I do, though? I just think that Anne Hathaway looks great. Brooke Shields in Mother of the Bride, I think, looks like a woman in her 50s. And I think it's okay to say that. Yeah. And I just want us to be like, yes, women in their 40s, over 30, whatever. You're still beautiful. You're still desirable. That's okay.
I mean, I love that. I love to end on that because it's true. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Newman-Bremang is Deputy Director at Refinery 29 Unbothered. Sadaf Ahsan is a freelance writer and co-host of Frequencies, the Reheat podcast. I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdel-Mahmoud. You're listening to Commotion. Okay, well, let's switch gears from talking about older actresses to this iconic older doll.
You know what I think? I think we should put our frickin' Constitution back.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Okay, ladies, let's do this. All those in favor of letting Barbie Land be Barbie Land, say aye.
That's a little moment from the blockbuster film Barbie that came out last year. And Barbie was a huge success. It was probably going to be a huge success anyway, but a lot of people loved how many Barbies there were in the movie. It was a very diverse range. Obviously, we had Margot Robbie playing the classic Barbie, but we also had Issa Rae, we had Hari Nef, just to name a couple. And a new Netflix doc is looking at the history of one particular Barbie in the line. Take a listen.
Years ago, there were no black dolls. They were all white dolls.
The little white girls, they can see possibility in their Barbies.
If you've gone your whole life and you've never seen anything made in your own image, there is damage done.
That is a clip from Black Barbie, a new doc that looks at the history of the Barbie brand's relationship with its Black consumers. Syrus Marcus Ware is here to talk about it. How are you, Syrus?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well. I'm excited to talk about this. I think it's such an important thing because it really does have an impact as a mom. I notice what my kids are playing with and what they're not playing with. So tell me about what the Barbie brand kind of meant to you as a kid.
I mean, we played Barbies all the time. And I should clarify, we didn't even always have TM Barbies. We had Mabel and Sally, which were those versions.
I had those too.
But Barbies, this idea of playing with these, particular kind of dolls. I think we had a couple of real Barbies, but most of our Barbies were knockoff Barbies. Mm-hmm. They were huge. They were the things that we spent our time doing. We would create these other worlds where they would be in a rock band together, or they'd be, swimming in a pool, and we would really enjoy and kind of play with these Barbies. So by the time I was in grade 2 and got my first Black Barbie, I was totally blown away.
So you've seen the doc. I'm curious if anything really surprised you or struck you and really stood out when you watched this.
The thing that surprised me the most from the doc, I mean, I'm familiar with this. Obviously, as a Black person, I grew up not having a lot of options in terms of dolls that I could play with. So the significance of the Black Barbie, is not lost on me. But what surprised me the most about the documentary was finding out that Mattel actually supported the Zendaya, a company in starting some early Black dolls. I wouldn't have thought that a big corporation would be so invested in what really was a Black liberatory strategy to make options for Black kids to see themselves. That surprised me.
Actually, do you want to tell us a bit more about that company, the Zendaya toy company that really played a big hand in the Black Barbie legacy?
Yeah, we have this company that actually grows out of activism after the uprisings in Watts and the Watts riot. We see this company that's formed together by Lewis Smith and Robert Hall, where they come together to create a cooperative toy company that is community-led and community-owned that would create Black dolls for Black kids. Not only Black dolls with the pigmentation of our skin, but also with features and hair textures that Black kids could sort of connect to. And this, of course, led the way for the creation of a whole bunch of toys for Black children, including eventually the Black Barbie.
Now, you mentioned Mattel was supporting the creation of this, and I thought it was interesting that even though they made the Black doll, it took 21 years for them to actually call it a Barbie. What did you think of that?
I mean, this is the reality. When I was a younger person and I was growing up with these Barbie dolls, they weren't the most realistic thing to compare your body to.
No.
They had these sort of unrealistic body shapes and, very white features, and even the Black Barbie and just sort of this very limited idea of what was a sort of image of beauty. So that was sort of already present. So it's not surprising at all to me that in a world that was still grappling with racism, still grappling with, even ideas of integration and desegregating our schools, this was still in that time period that people were still really grappling with that the racism would also be pervasive in the toy industry. I think there was a real resistance to creating dolls for Black children. This is why companies like Zendaya actually were created in the first place. And unfortunately, that was coming out of racism, and so it's not surprising to me that happened. But I think what's remarkable is that when they did say, wait a minute, this is a Black Barbie, and her name is Barbie, and she is, this empowering, female figure that we can all get behind. That so many people were ready for that. I think that they missed the mark.
Yeah, you can say that again. I'm going to play a moment from the Black Barbie doc now. And this clip sort of looks at the landmark study from Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, who used dolls to examine the impact that racism had on young kids. Take a listen.
We put them on a table, 2 white and 2 brown dolls. And we found that the majority of Black children at that time did, in fact, ascribe the positive characteristics to the white doll and the negative characteristics to the brown doll. I then asked the question, now show me the doll that's like you. Some of those children looked at me as if I were the devil himself for putting them in that predicament.
What a clip. Now that's from the 30s, that study, but I wonder how much has even really changed. Syrus, what do you think of what we just heard?
I mean, it's so significant that study from Kenneth and Mamie Clark, that led to a groundbreaking paper that they wrote in the 1950s, that is cited in the court decision around the Brown versus the Board of Education. It was, in fact, that study that was cited to say, look, there is a problem in what we are teaching Black children, and we need to revise the way that we're doing our education system. So to separate out African-American children, was causing this problem. So that's the first thing I think of as, wow, that study is what led to a lot of integration efforts, particularly in education. But I also think about Dr. Eve Tuck, who's an incredible Indigenous scholar, based in Toronto, based out of Oise, and she wrote this incredible paper called Suspending Damage, a love letter to our communities. And she talks about that study because, yes, it is true that in the initial part of the study, these Black children chose the white doll again and again and again, but they repeated the study a couple of years later when the kids were older, and the kids actually often chose the Black doll. So it also shows that, as kids grow and learn about racial justice, they can make decisions that are affirming to themselves. So I think about that as well.
That's very powerful. Syrus, you're a parent as well. I'm curious, what do you notice about what your kids are playing with, and how different is it from what you see in this doc?
It's amazing to me, this new generation. My daughter is a Gen Z through and through. And so she was growing up, in a very different world. And so by the time she was of the age to get a Barbie, there were options for Barbies that were maybe not Barbie brand, but there were, anatomically correct Barbies, and Barbies that had, round tummies, and Barbies that didn't have huge, triple E breasts, but maybe had, a different kind of body shape. And so she had a lot more options, in terms of Black dolls to play with. When I was a kid, in the late 1970s, I can remember my dad looking everywhere to try to find a Black doll for me and my twin, because he wanted us to see ourselves reflected. And it was really challenging in the Canada in the 70s at the time to find a Black doll. Now for my daughter, it's, there's many, many, many choices that I could choose, including very realistic Black baby dolls that they sell that she could, kind of parent and mummy as kids are prone to do. So it's quite an amazing moment. And then, of course, with the Barbie movie last summer, there's been a real reimagining of Barbie as a brand, which, had some problematic elements in terms of what it was teaching young girls about beauty standards. Mm-hmm. But now they seem to be opening up to a different set of possibilities of what Barbie could mean. So, we're seeing all sorts of different types of Barbies being created, including Barbies with disabilities, including Barbies who have very dark brown skin, including Barbies who have, sort of more ambiguous, genders or things like that. So that feels really hopeful.
And very quickly, Syrus, I wonder what it is that's so universal about dolls in our lives. I notice my daughter loves to have babies, loves to really take care of these dolls, loves to see herself in the dolls. What is it about this toy that just seems to connect so many people?
I think fundamentally human beings are caring, loving beings. We love to take care of each other. This is why mutual aid and collective care is such a beautiful thing in our communities. We fundamentally love to make the soup for the neighbor, or to go for that walk with an elderly neighbor to get them out. We love to care for each other. And kids see that. They see us parenting, they see us caring for our community members, and they want to be able to replicate that. So it's not a coincidence to me that my daughter always was the mom. She was always sort of taking care of these babies and tucking them in and feeding them and just really caring. So it's this way for our children to be able to practice what ultimately they're going to be able to do in community, which is take care of each other, come together, and sort of build a community. We did that with our Barbie dolls, and my daughter is doing that with her dolls now.
I love that. And I love that so much has changed. You know, I see the dolls that my kids play with really do represent quite a wide array. So much fun talking to you, Syrus. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Syrus Marcus Ware is a visual artist, activist, and assistant professor at McMaster University. You can watch the Barbie doc on Netflix.